What makes someone normal? Yeah. Growing up, I always felt different. It was a long time, though, before I could describe how I felt as different. And longer still, before I really understood what it was that I was actually different to. Our sense of normal, you see, is shaped by our upbringing, a combination of our cultural heritage, religious beliefs, the public institutions around us, and our exposure to diversity, or lack thereof, as the case often is. So to all intents and purposes, I had a normal upbringing. There was no reason for me to feel anything but normal, other than this vague and shapeless feeling that I could never quite shake. Then, as life happened, as it has a habit of doing, through puberty and into my 20s, things started to make sense. For one, I found out what gay was, and that I am it, proudly these days. Thank you. My parents divorced, people described me as quirky. I went through a period of depression as well, and these days I manage anxiety quite often. It turns out I also have ADHD, many of the traits of which go some way to explain my different experience of life and the world. But life doesn't operate to an idea of normal. In fact, I've come to consider that normal may only really exist in a statistical sense. I just turned 30, and I know that in any given year, something might happen that alters my path. But I'm not alone in any of this. Like me, you have probably had your share of things that make you feel different. Whether it's to do with your health, your finances, relationships, perhaps you've experienced discrimination, or you've simply not had the opportunities you thought you might have. The amazing thing about that is that because something happens to all of us, you can start to question whether normal works for you or whether it doesn't. I can't exactly pinpoint the day I realized I was queer or chose to embrace my quirks, or threw normal out the window and sat with the mess of life to enjoy it for all that it is. But I can tell you that since all of those things, I feel far more at home in myself, far better able to manage anxiety, and I've become a more compassionate person. It's my queerness, my deviation from normal, that allows me to channel this compassion. And here's how. I came of age with the internet, like many people in this room perhaps. And I used the internet as a means of connecting with queer people all around the world. People like me in one way, it turns out, were different to me in thousands of others. Through the internet, I learned so much about what it is to be queer, about the history of why this is, and I saw just how resilient queer communities are, especially in places where it's more difficult to be queer than where I grew up. The internet is our window to the world, and as I peered through, the pieces of my worldview fell into place. I saw just how deeply the interconnectedness of our society runs through the world. I first learned about climate change at university. I learned that human activity is altering the chemistry of Earth's atmosphere and oceans at an industrial scale. The greenhouse gases we produce are trapping more heat, leading to more extreme weather. We're melting the ice caps, we're bleaching the coral reefs, we're extending periods of drought, and we're making wildfires much more deadly. On the internet, I see just what all this means for real, everyday, normal people. People different to me in thousands of ways are like me in at least one. We're all deeply dependent on the balance of Earth's systems. Climate change is a threat to life and livelihood everywhere. This makes it a popular issue. More than 2/3 of UK voters say that climate and environment policy influences the way that they vote. Over 6 million people joined a strike for action on climate change, and 194 of the world's governments are signatories of the Paris Climate Agreement, which set limits of global temperature increase into international law. But knotted into the climate crisis is a crisis of compassion and a crisis of communication. Advocates for action on climate change often talk of avoiding some future or far-off worst-case scenario. So this fails to connect communities to the social and political context of climate change, because so many people are living a worst-case scenario right now. In the UK, over 14 million people are experiencing food insecurity. 1 in 10 households cannot reasonably afford to heat their homes. Almost a fifth of us have a respiratory disease, made worse in areas of high road traffic and air pollution. Youth unemployment is 2.5 times higher than the general population because young people are leaving education without the necessary skills or confidence for current job roles. And adults in the UK spend, on average, just 2 hours per month outdoors in nature, because we are one of the world's most nature-depleted countries. So, of course, communities left behind by politics and industry feel frustrated, angered even, by what they see as a climate activist telling them what they can and cannot do. I can empathize with people who feel unseen or unheard. Having grown up different, I know what it feels like. Empathy is a gateway tool to opening dialogue with those more skeptical about climate change and social justice issues. How do you feel through these challenging and turbulent times? Well, a wonderful wizard once said that when people are angry and hungry, they begin to look for someone to blame. It's through times of uncertainty that the seeds of division create rifts in our communities as we grapple with different problems. Unfortunately, those perceived as most different are often the first to receive the blame. Today's problems are the result of yesterday's decisions. Tomorrow's problems will be the result of today's decisions. These are the choices made in the seats of power, in the seats at the boardroom table, and in the seats around your dinner table. Every day, in the choices we make, we're shaping the future for ourselves and for our communities. The question becomes, how can we make these choices constructive rather than destructive? And the answer lies in empathy and in community. Your local community is rich with unseen and unheard voices. Groups of people, often volunteers, dedicating their time to serve a need that local people have. The key to unlocking community-level resilience to the economic and environmental impacts of climate change is right there in our community infrastructure. In my work, I strengthen the resilience of community organizations so that they, in turn, can strengthen the resilience of their communities. In isolation, not often does their incredible work look or smell or feel like climate action, but it is. There's a volunteer-run community garden project. By growing organic produce for local people, they ensure that their community has access to cheap and nutritious food. They also create a setting for those who need to learn how to grow for themselves, often finding intergenerational friendships along the way, as young people pick up skills from older people, and older folk have somewhere to socialize and stay active. The wealth of benefits for everyone involved anchors this activity in the local community and gives everyone something to be proud of. There's an organization improving access to cycling and active transport. in so doing, they build confidence and independence for young people and bring benefits for physical fitness and mental well-being for people of all ages. By giving more people more choice about how they get around, those who do choose to drive spend less time sitting in traffic because there are fewer cars on the road. Fewer cars means cleaner air means better respiratory health. Oh, and there's less environmental impact. There is even a local cricket club who, through their own determination, have reduced their energy bills by making material improvements to the fabric of their building. They're gathering the leaders of other community organisations in similar struggles with energy prices at the clubhouse so the committee can share everything they have learned about what the energy transition means for a community organisation in a community setting. By sharing this information through peer networks, it cuts through in a way that government policy and corporate jargon could never hope to achieve. And it means that next time there's a spike in energy prices, all of these groups will be shielded from the worst impacts. And their communities will continue to benefit from the services that they put on. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that this kind of thing only happens in affluent middle-class communities where people have the time and money to invest. But each example I just shared there, and there are countless others, comes from a community among the UK's 10% most deprived. Resilience happens when ordinary people do extraordinary things, often on a shoestring and usually without trying to be extraordinary. In order for things like this to benefit communities in the long term and to thrive, they need the involvement of people, businesses, and government. We can build resilience from the ground up and attract the wraparound support needed as we go. The cumulative impact of a vast and growing network of people who care doing what they can is a system of resilient communities able to withstand the challenges that politics and climate may throw their way, and able to bounce back quickly when significant shocks do hit. Participation is the route to resilience. Research suggests that volunteering is actually good for your health. And many employers have social value objectives, a way for their company to do some good. That might be your route to participation. So involve yourself. We need community resilience, and we need it everywhere. So we have to think big. When doing our bit for climate change or for the community that you dedicate your time to, we can often be put off by thinking too big. Big feels out of reach or intimidating, impossible even. But big doesn't have to mean global. We don't have to change the world. It doesn't even mean national. Something big can happen local, especially if what happens in one place can be shared or replicated in another. As more big but local things happen, the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. And these things happen when we work with our neighbours, not against them. So think big but local, for your own health, well-being and fulfilment, for those in your community whose life and life chances depend on the work of community organisations, and so that each and every one of us can weather the storms that come our way. Because we don't need to be heard to create change. In fact, often it's creating change that gets us listened to. There are myriad ways that you can support your community organisation, and they'll welcome your skills, time, and effort in whatever form you can bring. The more that we bring to our community infrastructure, the greater our collective strength through these challenging and turbulent times. Climate resilience is community resilience. Resilient communities are cohesive communities. And cohesion happens when we put our empathetic foot forward. Thank you very much.